All right. Everyone can hear me okay? Perfect. Welcome to United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey. While I'm just giving a couple extra minutes in case people are parking and needing to wander in, because we are indoors tonight since it was forecasted to be quite not not ideal weather for being outside. We are inside in our smaller little lecture area for like classes sized. Uh, in the meantime, welcome to those who are also joining us online. Because that's right, we do live stream these on Twitch and YouTube. So if you're ever at home or out and about and you're wondering, man, I'm bored, what can I do on a Saturday night at 8 o'clock p.m.? You can join us online, seeing what our presentation is that day. Tonight's presentation is Settlements in Space, so I'm anticipating a excellent presentation. In addition, you can check us out on our website, uacnj.org. That's where you're going to find a list of all our upcoming presentations as well as a list of all our member clubs, because we are actually a club made up of other astronomy clubs with our goal of trying to get people joined to their local astronomy club and getting that science and astronomy outreach wherever we can, which is why we also live stream now. In addition, you can check us out on our social media pages, our Facebook, our Instagram. We have a Discord server for anyone who likes to use Discord as a chat program. If you have any questions or want to share your astrophotography images, feel free to drop those in any of those spots and just tag us or send us a message there. We'd love to see them. I do periodically check those, usually about daily, and try and get back to you. Now, for those of you who are here, you guys get the safety briefing because that is inescapable. If you need to use the restroom, that is the porta potty outside. It is illuminated by red for ease of not only seeing where it is, but being able to see a little bit of what's going on inside there. Because it is a state park and it is in fact dark outside. When we are wandering around, if we are wandering around, any flashlights or whatnot that we may have, please keep those pointed towards the ground. We don't need to unintentionally blind someone because night vision is precious and it does take like 20 minutes to readjust. That being said, we are using our headlights when we are leaving because I don't want to get run over, and I'm sure that is also a feeling that everyone here in the US shares, that medical bills are just too expensive. So, headlights, yes, flashlights towards the ground. Normally, on a nice night, each of the sheds that you saw out there contains a telescope. Well, regardless of whether they contain the telescope, we don't just randomly put them out there. They live there. But on a good night, we would roll off the roof and allow stargazing. I don't think that's going to happen tonight, but feel free to, on your way out, you'll have seen it on your way in also, is our little museum area and gift shop. So do check that out. We are a nonprofit, so all of those proceeds and any donations, including the people who have subbed on Twitch or donated through our PayPal, which again available on our website, goes to helping us pay our bills and keep the outreach that we are able to do free to the general public. With that, we're going to get into tonight's presentation, which is Settlements in Space. Our presenter tonight is Karl Hricko. Karl received a doctorate degree in science and humanities from Rutgers University. Karl was a science department chair and taught earth science and biology at Carteret High School, as well as being an adjunct professor elsewhere. He has been a past president of astronomy clubs, but continues to conduct science programs on the radio, on WNTI, and to make presentations on science topics. He began a National Space Society chapter in New Jersey and became a space ambassador for NSS. He has used the Hubble Space Telescope, which honestly is the most impressive thing to me. Do you have plans on using the James Webb Telescope as well? Ooh. And currently he has a podcast called Carl's Orbit.
Hey, but in this moment,
Yep. Is your
I, oh, I have to press that button. I was able to use the Hubble Space Telescope because I'm an amateur astronomer like everybody else here.
Yep. I'm just gonna adjust this so they can hear you.
But they opened the availability of the use of the telescope at the point when the Hubble was rubble. Remember that they sent it up and they didn't configure the mirror correctly, and as a result, they had to send up glasses in order for it to see properly afterward. So initially, the professionals didn't want to use it because the images came in fuzzy. So they said, "Okay, you amateurs, you can ask if you can use it by submitting some kind of request." And I did, and I was lucky, and I got it. That's how I got it.
And with that, I'm gonna give this over to Carl for his presentation.
Hey. Again, welcome everybody here. Good to see everyone here, and I hope you enjoy whatever is being presented and have some interesting questions after the presentation, or maybe even during if it's really pressing, that sort of thing. Well, as you can see here, I'm a member also of the National Space Society, NSS, up here on the screen, and we have a chapter in New Jersey, as a matter of fact. It's the Space and Astronomy Society of Northwest Jersey. And you can access the information by looking it up on Facebook and also going through the website of the NSS itself, and all the chapters are indicated there. It's really international now. As a matter of fact, there's chapters in India and also in other places of the world located. Ad Astra, by the way, is the motto in Latin, to the stars, ad astra. Hey, that's where the settlements come in, settlements in space. Well, here's our emblem in terms of our chapter. If anybody's interested in finding out more information and maybe even joining, we don't charge anything. We got to do a lot of work. No worry. I'll provide a card for you if you're interested after the presentation, of course. This is me in my better days. And we'll start out with the settlements in space. And as you see here, the image shows what you might find on almost any settlement in space. And they can be located in various locations. For example, you could have them in colonization could take place in free space. It could take place in orbit around the Earth. It could take place at points between the Earth and the Sun, Earth and the Moon, 5 in each of the locations called Lagrange points, where it's like a sweet spot where if you place something up there, it stays there. As a matter of fact, right now, NASA has space telescopes out at some of these Lagrange points. Interesting, very interesting. So we have that as well. And you could have colonization or settlements taking place beyond Lagrange points, lunar. And we have planetary on the asteroid belt, asteroids as well, and natural satellites going around the planets. Some are solid, and also in locations, we'll say deep space as well. Now, why do we want to go? Well, these are examples of different kind of settlements, artist conceptions, and they're quite interesting. Why do you want to go in space? Well, for example, it could be for survival, because we always are under the danger of being hit by some kind of space object, small or large. For example, asteroids, meteors, and things of that nature. You may have come across some information on the web that had to do with some kind of object about could have been a small comet or maybe an asteroid that flew past an area in Russia, for example. And some people had taken images of it, and it's online yet if you want to access it. Selyabinsk, I think, is the name of the place. I'm not sure, but I think that's the name of the place. Anyway, to protect us, we would provide settlements in space. Also, to survive in that way, as well as maybe pollution might drive us off our planet. And it's always good to have another Earth being available for us. And also, for example, in terms of curiosity, gaining knowledge by going into space, things of that nature as well. So, this is why we would think of ourselves as being a space-faring civilization in order to go out into space. But a lot of things have got to be overcome first because there's a lot of side effects going into space, one of them being microgravity, the other being radiation. And we'll see that as we go along here. Now, here's an example of one kind of a space settlement in space, free space now. These are settlements that can be placed at that Lagrange points or in orbit somewhere around Mars or something of that nature, where people live on board in something quite as large as a village, larger than a space station, obviously. Space station on steroids would be something like that. So an orbiting village in space seems to be possible. And a fellow by the name of Eugene O'Neill came up with this idea. He was an engineer who taught at Princeton, while engineering, of course. And this is his idea of maybe one of the orbiting types of settlements that might be possible in order to establish a colony. And what do we need on a colony? Well, we do need materials, of course, almost commonsensical. We, in essence, have to carry our Earth environment with us in order to survive. Otherwise, we just couldn't live because we're not adapted to any other kind of situation or conditions that may exist in space no matter where we go. So we have to come up with some kind of means by which we can survive under the alien conditions that exist in space. And so, of course, we have to bring materials with us. We have to provide energy, power of some sort for heating and things of that nature, manufacturing whatever we're doing where we're going. And we have to have some kind of transportation back and forth and some kind of communication going on between ourselves, wherever we are, and Earth, and between ourselves in on the settlement itself. Also, we have to have some kind of way of surviving there. So some kind of a life support system, which we have on Earth automatically, hopefully, wherever you live. So these are the necessities. Now, I wanted to show you Biosphere 2. Don't know if anybody knows about Biosphere 2. This is a kind of an area in Arizona where millionaires got together in a consortium and constructed this region called Biosphere 2. Biosphere 1 is Earth. Biosphere 2 is supposed to represent Earth by coming up with different biomes, 7 different biomes, like agricultural biome, maybe a beach biome, savanna, desert, ocean, things of that nature that sort of represent these biomes on Earth. And the reason why they did that is so that they can see how people might survive under conditions where they were supposed to have been separated from the environment of our planet Earth. So they were supposed to operate within the kind of an isolated situation. But that didn't work out too well because they constructed it of concrete and it bled carbon dioxide as time went on, and they had a hard time eliminating carbon dioxide from the facilities. And also people sneaked in pizzas over the weekend. They weren't supposed to do that either. Anyway, that was the idea of Biosphere 2. It's still functioning now, as a matter of fact. It's been picked up by the University of Arizona. And what goes on there now is various forms of research in different biomes, changing the temperature, which they can control, pressure, things of that nature. So things can be controlled with different kinds of devices and means they have in that facility. Oh, and by the way, recently there has been construction of a facility next to the Biosphere 2 that is called SAM as the acronym. It has to do with space environment on Mars and the Moon that will be able to provide an environment similar to Mars at one time, Moon at another, for the astronauts to train before they do go to the Moon and to Mars. And by the way, I probably, and you probably know, that even at this time there are some people who don't believe that we've been to the Moon, right? Anybody here don't believe we've been to the Moon? Let me see. Nobody? Okay. Yeah, we've been to the Moon and back, of course. But again, we're going back, supposedly. And by the way, the date is set for the 30s, 2030, although NASA would like to go 29, but kind of doubt that very much. It costs money and will of everyone to do it. Elon Musk is also thinking about getting involved to travel possibly to the Moon in some fashion or other, maybe as part of the spacecraft makeup itself, how it's organized, and sections of it. But anyway, that's the idea of Biosphere 2 to simulate conditions, and now for SAM to simulate conditions going to Moon and Mars for the astronauts. So this is the idea of looking at space, and what about different kinds of settlements? Do we have a settlement right now? We have a kind of an outpost. And this hitchhiker is showing us a direction to go to the outpost, which he's probably going to as well. And the outpost, of course, is our space station. There's a lot of work going on the space station. It holds about 7 astronauts. I just heard on the radio this morning that the SpaceX is sending up 2 astronauts on board. It can hold 4, but 2 are being sent up because there are 2 that were stranded and still are stranded on board the International Space Station. If you've come across the news involving that, where they went up on a spacecraft by Boeing that it called Starliner, if I remember the name correctly, where they had trouble with the positioning jets on board, and the helium leak that was a problem. So they're bringing down the spacecraft without any astronauts on board, and then the spacecraft being sent up by Elon Musk to the space station carrying 2 will exchange. 2 will go on, and those 2 will come back down again. So it's going up that way. They're doing all kind of research on the space station as well. I came across information where they sent up some stem cells, and stem cells can regrow into different kinds of tissue, as you know. It can do better in a microgravity condition than it can on Earth. So gravity affects it so that it requires longer time to produce different tissue from the stem cells than microgravity, in a condition of microgravity. So I find that quite interesting as well. So stem cell research is going on, and recently they set up a special refrigerator in order to see if they can make what's known as Bose-Einstein condensate, which is exotic matter. The 5th state of matter is that condensate. You know, solid, liquid, gas, plasma, and the BEC, Bose-Einstein condensate. And it has kind of a negative gravity sort of operation. You push it one way, it comes back toward you. It goes the opposite way as you push it. It's a weird kind of piece of exotic matter, which I'll talk about a little later in this, explaining how exotic matter is necessary for different kinds of things to take place, involving even moving through a wormhole in space. That's interesting as well, because it keeps on closing. You need exotic matter to keep it open, and here you have BECs being made on board the space station. So the beginning of this kind of research is going on, and maybe operational later on as time goes on. All going on the space station. Interesting. And here's how it looks on board the space station. Some pictures. That's the cupola or cupola. Some windows on board the space station where astronauts can look out, see Earth, monitor to a certain extent, take images and things of that nature. And of course, there's a condition where they simply float around, and we call it weightlessness. But in reality, it's not weightlessness because there's still mass there, and there's still gravity pulling them down. It's just that they're orbiting the Earth at a certain altitude and speed to keep them moving such that as the Earth's gravity pulls them down, they move away in that orbit. So they're kept in orbit. They're falling toward the Earth while the Earth is curving away from them as a sphere. That keeps them in orbit. So they're really falling toward the Earth, like in an elevator. When an elevator drops, that's that falling, free fall in space, it's called. And that's what they're doing, free falling in space. So as a result, they're floating around, and different positions you can see. It doesn't make a difference. There's no up or down or around in a kind of free fall situation in space. And here is some kind of experiments they do with motion of various objects in a free fall situation as well, to see what happens when they push them, and different kind of material they work with. And so this is what we call weightlessness, but it's free fall, really. And also they're experimenting with growth of plants in terms of hydroponics. You may have heard of that, in water, different nutrients placed in water. Also the idea of aeronautics, where they're suspended and you spray them with water. And a third type, which isn't being done on there, called aquanautics, where there's a tank where there's fish and animals of that nature that live in water. And their waste produces nutrients for the plants to grow on. That would be the aquanautic kind of experimentation. Now, the first thing that happens to an astronaut going up there to the space station is their appearance changes. They have a puffy face developing because the fluids of their body, since they're in a free fall situation, go to their head. And as a result, the face puffs up. I don't know how long that lasts, but there are different side effects that are produced when these astronauts go up to the space station. Because gravity, of course, holds it down in place on Earth. We're adapted to Earth as humans evolved on Earth. The physiological kind of structure and functioning of the body adapts to the Earth's gravity. Whereas in a free fall situation, you're out of Earth's gravity. You're in an alien kind of environment. So this is the idea of this kind of condition causes bone loss because of calcium leaving the bone, and as a result, the bone becomes very, I guess it becomes brittle, and it loses density because the microgravity situation, the lack of the proper gravity on Earth, causes hormones which control bone growth to be affected. So the microgravity condition is not too good. And right now, what they're doing at the University of Texas in Galveston, I just picked this up recently, they just started, they're working on producing artificial Earth gravity so it can be used in space. And essentially, as some may know, using the idea of centrifugal force in order to produce the artificial Earth gravity. It's a tricky situation, and you have to have a large kind of structure in order for it to work properly. That's one of the problems that they face in order to produce the artificial gravity in space. But they're working on it. University of Texas. That's why the astronauts have to exercise 2 hours every day on board the space station in order to maintain not only the idea of maybe proper hormonal effect on the bones, but also the idea of muscles. Because the microgravity will affect that as well. Let me see something here. Okay. Let me go back. Yeah, it affects the muscles and the nerves. Now, the muscles, of course, work against gravity. And that's why the muscles are there, to support our bodies to work within our kind of condition here on Earth. But in a microgravity situation, it doesn't work the same way, obviously, and the muscles need some kind of exercise. And again, the exercise helps the muscles to develop properly and to work properly. That affects the heart too, as well. Now, the brain is affected because of the fact that the whole cycle of sleep is affected on the space station, especially because the space station has 45 minutes of daylight and 45 minutes of night, because one orbit around the Earth, one day, is an hour and a half. So every hour and a half, a day passes by on board the space station, going by space station days. So they have to get adjusted to that kind of situation on board the space station as well. And so it affects the brain in that fashion. And there's also psychological effects on the brain too, because you're in essentially a very small, isolated place. And one astronaut, you may know his name, Kelly, he has a twin brother. And they're both astronauts. One stayed on Earth, one went up in space on the space station. And the one on the space station stayed on board for about a year. So he had a longer duration stay on the space station than any other astronaut. And so they wanted to see what effect it would have on him. And there were quite a few different effects. He came back younger than his twin brother. How about that? It affects time. Acceleration and gravity affects time, as Einstein said. Wow. Anyway, the idea being the brain is affected, and psychological effects are there as well. And so there's got to be some kind of training before going, and maybe even screening as to who goes into space, so they're psychologically prepared and are able to do so under the different kind of conditions that exist in space. And we have the vestibular system, which is the system of balance in the ear. The idea of the semicircular canals and the cochlea in the ear are affected by a lack of gravity. Disorientation takes place. So it's like being on a centrifuge, or something of that nature. But in this case, it's free fall, microgravity causing the effects on the vestibular system. And so as a result, when they arrive at the space station, and maybe even en route, they begin to have these side effects in their balance, where it's hard to be balanced properly because they lose positional feeling. What position are they in? Even motion. Have a hard time moving in a certain direction or something of that nature. So they become dizzy as a result of that, become nauseous. And I think most of them become nauseous the first few days until they become somewhat acclimated to being in a new kind of environment. So things like that take place in space unless you have some kind of artificial gravity that would take care of the situation. So it's coming as technology increases. It comes along, and we're getting to know what kind of treatment is necessary to somehow take care of the side effects involving what we're talking about now, and even what's coming up as we go along, because there is effect on the kidneys as well. The kidneys shrink. The astronauts had shrinkage of kidneys because of the muscles being atrophied and so on and so forth with the kidneys due to microgravity, like of Earth's gravity. Radiation affects our genetic material, so that they found that the astronauts, when they came back and they were examined, they discovered that the chromosomes inside their cells, which are the genetic material, contain DNA. And at the base of the chromosomes, as you can see here, the yellow caps, these are called telomeres. And the telomere caps on the chromosomes protect the chromosomes in which are located the DNA strands, which contain the genetic material. So the caps are like caps on your shoelaces, and they prevent the shoelace from unraveling. And so they protect the chromosomes from becoming unraveled to a certain extent, causing mutations and things of that nature as well. So the telomeres were shortened, they found. And there's got to be some kind of way of treating that with supplements and things of that nature that would prevent that from happening. So again, all these different issues have got to be addressed and doing that sort of thing. So what about the environment itself? It's got to be an environment where you have fresh air provided. It's got to be pressurized, obviously. Otherwise, you can't breathe the air. Without pressure, you couldn't get the air inside your lungs. So the pressure helps you to inhale the air in. Without the pressure, no way. So the idea is it's got to be pressurized, and also protection against microbial contamination on board. And even when they go through all kinds of different sort of ways of trying to decontaminate different kinds of probes they sent up to Mars or to the moon, and the astronauts on board the space station, they can't eliminate all the microbes. There's still a certain amount of them there. So they've got to take care of that as well. Be aware of that at any rate, and maybe take some kind of, again, some kind of chemical supplements to build up their immune system so it's not brought down by the microbial infection that you may find in those areas. So the environment's got to be looked at very carefully as well. And long duration. Oh, I'm sorry. The idea of getting rid of human waste. How do you do that? Well, on board the space station, it's very easy. All you do is dump it out. That's what they do. They dump it out in the Earth's atmosphere because there's an atmosphere. There's still atmosphere where the space station is orbiting. It's called low Earth orbit. And so there's still some atmosphere there. You dump out the waste, it burns up in the atmosphere, becomes carbon dioxide, water, and maybe some kind of minerals left over in the form of like you get when you burn any kind of organic material. So anyway, one way is to dump it out if you're next to an atmosphere of some sort, burns up there. But in outer space, I was surprised to find that they can use a 3D printer to convert the waste material into plastics, which is I found interesting. Some types of plastics, you can do it that way, and nutrients as well. And as far as urine is concerned, they're doing it now. They recycle it, distillation process. So it's being done right now on board the space station. So these are ways then of treating human waste and going to any kind of settlement in space or orbiting, whatever else. Radiation a problem, ionizing radiation coming from the sun, cosmic rays coming from outer space, from other kinds of sources, stars, so on and so forth. Got to be taken care of as well. Got to be some kind of protection against radiation because it has major effects, as you saw, involving our genetic material. So this got to be taken care of as well by shielding mostly. And then we have the idea of the space flight duration. Long duration flights, we have to have some kind of means to protect the astronauts against what I've been talking about here. That's necessary. You just can't go to Mars. Takes about maybe about a year and a half or a year to get to Mars. So you can't say, gee, I forgot something, I got to go back. Going to the moon is easy, 3 days to the moon, and if you get something, you go back and get it. But Mars, a little bit different. So long duration is harder. Now, the next area is Lagrange points, as I mentioned before. Lagrange points, 5 points between us and the sun, us and the moon. These are the sweet spots. When you put something up there, it stays there. And as I mentioned, we put telescopes up there so far. They're staying there and doing their work in getting information at all wavelengths, infrared, ultraviolet, and so on and so forth. Visible light, things of that nature. Yes? Reserving? There aren't too many people going that have the facilities and the technical know-how and availability to go. So far, we're the only ones that have that capability. Has anyone been to the moon besides us? No. So far. The Chinese are on their way. They already sent a probe up. They have a space station as well, orbiting the Earth, as well as ours. 2 space stations so far. Ours and theirs, as far as I know. But no one really is capable of going to the Lagrange points at this stage of the game. There might be in the future where there will have to be some kind of control over who's doing what. You're right about that, though. Like when we go to the moon, who's going to work in what geographical location? Territory, we'll be calling it, right? Who's going to have this territory? Who's going to have that territory? What kind of government? So all these are things that have to be worked out in terms of those settlements. I'm just talking now about what affects the astronauts in terms of physiological processes and what basically is necessary in the way of energy power of sorts to provide the correct temperature and things of that nature, pressurization. But insofar as human interaction and how humans sort of set up a government, things of that sort, that all has got to be ironed out. Who's going to be in charge? There's going to be one agency in charge? Suppose I disagree. All kinds of problems in that respect as well, I'm sure. But you're right about that one. Here's some examples of some of the space stations. Artists have all kinds of notions about space stations and what they are. Could this be your home? I don't know. Do you want it to be your home? Maybe interesting, I would think, at any rate. And hey, how about a hotel in space? Or maybe timeshare. Buy some timeshare in some orbiting kind of settlement in space. That would be interesting as well. But hey, if you have a rich uncle, maybe he can buy you some kind of transportation to a future hotel in space, which I'm sure you'll see before, oh, about maybe 20 years or something of that nature. I'm sure someone's going to do that. Because the idea is to commercialize space as well. That's the idea, to make it worthwhile. Develop a industrial economy in space and on different areas where settlements will be created, like on the moon or on Mars and so forth. Developing economies there as well that make it worthwhile in terms of money making. And that's what will happen. We'll have different kinds of hotels in space, as you can see. And you can even take care of household chores, I suppose, while you're at the hotel or whatever else. Here's an idea of a city in space. We're talking about big-time stuff. This is like the space station on steroids. Look at that. That's major. Artist conception of that. Here's a type. They're named after people who developed them. You can see the Bernal sphere. Here's one type of space settlement. Free space now. We're talking free space. Somewhere in space, at the Lagrange points, or somewhere going around another planet or something of that nature. So the Bernal is one. And then we have Bigelow. Bigelow is a blow-up one. Got to be made of strong material. Blow it up and it creates a kind of a space station, an outpost of sorts in space. So Bigelow is working on something of that nature. And here's an Indian woman from. She was the first woman astronaut from India. And this kind of structure is named after her. You can see Kalpana 1 is called Space Settlement. And you can see how it's made. Here's the Kalpana, and with a robotic kind of gardening system set up here. Agriculture on board is planned. And here's the idea of another Stanford torus. Here's some other ideas of settlements in space. And the next area, not free space, but going to the moon. Well, we've been to the moon one time, more than 50 years ago. Expect to go back again, as I mentioned, in the 30s possibly. And NASA's setting up something to go to the moon. Now, one side is quite different than the other, as you notice. The left side, you can see here, has black marks on it. Galileo, when he looked through his telescope in about the 1500s, I think, around that time, he spotted the black spots and thought they were bodies of water on the moon. So he called them Maria, seas. And we still call them seas. Sea of Tranquility is where the astronauts landed the first time, and so on and so forth. So the side facing us, and this side always faces us. We hardly ever see any part of the other side. We see bits and pieces because it kind of rocks back and forth. When it does spin. And yet we see only one side. How is that? Interesting. Well, as it goes around us, we see one side. It spins 1/4 turn as it goes 1/4 turn in orbit. See the same side. As it goes around, orbit again 1/4. It spins 1/4. See the same side. Goes around again 1/4. It spins 1/4. See the same side. So it spins at the same rate it orbits. That's how it works. We only see one side. Communication can only take place so far from the side facing us, which is why they landed only on one side. How many times have they landed? Anyone know? How many times have they landed on the moon so far? 6 times on the moon. And left behind several things, the way we research kind of instruments and things of that nature. So we're going to see if we can go to the moon again. I guess we will. But we're going to places where there's a supply of water. We'll try to do that. There's water on the moon, if you didn't know it. In craters hidden from sunlight are bodies of ice. And also, some of the rocks are hydrated. And if they can develop a technique of extracting the hydrated water in the rocks on the moon, we can also obtain water in that fashion as well. So it all depends on technology, just like Lagrange points. We're the only ones that go there based on technology. Oh, by the way, the astronauts took this picture on the way to the moon before they went down or coming back. And that's what we'll see from the moon, from the settlement. Earthrise. This is Earth rising, as seen from the moon. That's interesting, I thought. And they landed on this. There were 3 parts of the spacecraft: the control area where the astronauts were, the in-between area, which had all the different kind of controls in the way of having oxygen and electricity and so forth, the service module, and the end would be the landing module. And this is the landing module. Went down to the surface with the with the 2 astronauts. One stayed on board, orbited, never went down. Only 2 went down at a time. And that's the lander on the moon. Now, who was the first person on the moon? Anybody know? Armstrong. All right. Now, they show you this picture, and originally the people got the wrong impression that this was Armstrong stepping down on the moon, but it wasn't. Armstrong stepped down first with a camera, turned around, took a picture of Buzz Aldrin stepping down. He was the second guy on the moon. That's Buzz Aldrin. He's from Jersey, by the way. You know that? He's from Jersey. Yeah. Second person on the moon was Aldrin. Here he is. He's in most of the pictures, by the way. How about the last person on the moon? Who was the last person that left the moon? What astronaut? His name is there. What do you say? Eugene Cernan. C-E-R-N-A-N. Last person on the moon. How about that? Not known too much. We left some stuff back on the moon, but this, not junk like this, of course, but we left some stuff back, flags on the moon, footprints, left instrumentation, mirrors that reflect lasers sent from different Earth observatories to the moon to bounce back to figure out the exact distance the moon is from us. Stuff like that they left on the moon. They left on the moon seismographs to check out if there were moonquakes and things of that nature that you may not know about. So that stuff was left back on the moon. So we're going back to the moon. Hopefully we'll set up settlements of this nature. You can see the images that these imaginative artists have in mind. And what do we need on the moon to survive? Well, about the same stuff we need on any kind of settlement, but a little more is mentioned here in terms of the idea of shelter. Of course, we have a place that's sheltered, things of that sort. And we need, of course, food, water, energy. Whatever we need on Earth, we have to have on the moon to survive. Communication, transportation, things of that nature as well. Now, we can have a settlement on the moon because of the volcanic craters and the lava tubes that are empty below the surface. The people organizing a program to go to the moon are thinking about using the volcanic, tubes, lava tubes, as a place to have shelter below the ground, protection against radiation and incoming meteorites. So you have to have a place that was pressurized. You have to have pressure. Don't forget that in order to breathe the oxygen that you're providing. You have to have a supply of oxygen, clean air. The same things pretty much as I mentioned before, as you saw over here on board the space station to survive. So that's what we'd have to survive, and a connecting kind of passageways between different parts of the settlement, obviously. And if you walked outside, of course, you have to wear the spacesuit, no matter where you went, to protect yourself against the environment. How about power? Power from the sun, essentially, solar energy. Only way. You can't bring up fuel. Besides, by that time, we won't have any more fossil fuel. So we use solar energy to provide energy for us on the sun, obviously. Food, bring up some food, but it won't last very long, so we have to be prepared, or whoever goes up there, not us. I mean, we're not going, right? Whoever goes up there has got to be able to make food, grow food in the form of, as I mentioned before, different kinds of techniques involving hydroponics, aquaponics, and aeroponics. And in this case, that would take place. But how about protein? You need protein as well. We get some protein from vegetables. Some vegetarians. That's what vegetarians do. Anybody a vegetarian here that know more about it than I do? You are? No. In any case, protein necessary. And what's interesting, I just came across this information. 3D printers, if you have the material, organic material, can make food. It can make bread from dough, 3D printer layering the dough itself to make the bread. It can make ice cream, purees from vegetable and various kind of gelatinous material. It can make all kinds of, even pizzas. How about that? You can't go wrong. Anyway, 3D copying can do that. Amazing. Amazing. Oh, by the way, it can also make body parts. You realize that? The process of making kidneys, other body parts. I think it can make fleshy substances like ear parts and things of that nature, the fleshy portion of it, as far as is capable at this point. So food has to be grown on there in different ways. And it's done with a 3D printer, of course. Helpfully, some of it is. Hopefully and helpfully. But you can't barbecue in a gravity on the moon. The gravity of the moon is about 1/6 that of the Earth. So think of your weight and divide it by 6. That's how much you would weigh on the moon. Water. Well, water would, of course, be gotten from the, as I mentioned, the craters where there's ice, and also from some of the rocks with a technology that is capable of obtaining the hydrated, the water from hydrated rocks. I don't know about the capability of combining hydrogen with oxygen in a way where you're making water, H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. I don't think that's been developed yet to any extent. I don't know anybody working on that either at this point. But that might be a possibility in the future as technology goes on. You can't stop technology. AI is the big thing now that people are talking about, artificial intelligence all over the place. Your phones, I imagine, are an example of some form of artificial intelligence, right? You want to ask it something, hey, Google, when you ask it, and it gives you information, whatever you want to know, pretty much. AI. It's on its way. It is here, as a matter of fact. And what else will we need? Well, communication. Calling up. Communication among people in the settlement, different parts of the settlement. Calling Earth. Making sure that Earth knows what's happening, what condition we're in on the moon and so forth. Monitoring us to a certain extent. We need anything. 3 days, we got it. Also, communication with our loved ones, right? Friends and relatives would be interesting. Also, we need tools and equipment, of course, to keep things maintained and to build and so on. And that's where the 3D printer comes in handy. to make the larger kind of structures, and also to provide a means by which to have transport back and forth. And again, as I mentioned, 3D printer. So you need the transport of this back and forth. What do you need for transport? Well, we need something like what's coming up. Oh no, that's for pioneers. I know we're pioneers, but we're not going to do it this way, obviously. That's a bad way of doing it. We're not going to do it this way either. It's hard to keep yourself exploring the moon on a bicycle. We're doing it this way, where it's got to be enclosed and has to have, again, the Earth environment inside of it being generated in some fashion or other. Oxygen, pressurization, and so forth, protection against the elements, radiation, micrometeors, and things of that nature. So some protection. When going outside, wearing a spacesuit, obviously to have something of that nature. Now, we can learn a lot by going to the moon, other considerations, and we also have other considerations in a sense of maybe looking at the moon in terms of its origin and evolution, find out more information about that, because then it could explain how things take place in our solar system generally, with all the different kinds of natural satellites like the moon and so on and so forth, planets, things of that nature, and placing telescopes on the moon to observe not only Earth, but also deep space in a much more definite way than, and clearer way than on the Earth. We can also send up robots, have robots working with us, which are being developed now. Matter of fact, the Japanese are working on a humanoid type of robots, if you're not familiar with that idea and what's happening in that fashion. And they're having them working right now, operational, where people can, I guess, purchase, maybe lease your own personal robot as a butler or as a cook or something of that sort in the house, housemaid, and things of that nature. It's available right now. Check that out on the web. That's interesting. So robots to the moon. Will we see these? Will we take these? No, we're not going to take these. They're going to stick with the people on Star Wars. Now, what about going to the moon? We're not going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way. NASA has a mission. And the mission itself, SLS, is the launch part of the mission, the rocket itself. Space Launch System, SLS. And the mission is called Artemis, which happens to be, mythologically, the sister of Apollo, which was the Apollo mission to the moon that we had recently, 50 years ago or more. But the Apollo mission, Apollo named after the mythological character Apollo. His sister, Artemis. That's why they named it Artemis. Artemis 3 will be the one where the astronauts will land on the moon. There's Artemis 1 and 2 will go around the moon, and then finally 3 will have them land on the moon itself. That's what you see over here. And the spacecraft, as well called Orion, based on the name of the constellation Orion, and mythological being called Orion in Greek mythology. And setting up some kind of settlement or colony on the moon. If you have an outpost, a very small kind of settlement, and then it becomes like maybe something bigger to a settlement finally, where there's many people living there. Now, what kind of idea will that be in terms of saving the Earth? Well, if we're on the moon, we have a head start in spotting different asteroids coming in our direction. Because sometimes we hear on the news an asteroid just passed us by several thousand of miles between us and the moon. That's happened already in the past. But after it passes us by, this will give us an opportunity to spot them before they come and be prepared for them before they come, because now they developed a program where they will attempt to ward off the path of an incoming asteroid if it's calculated to hit Earth. They can hit the asteroid, thereby changing its path so it misses us. They already sent up uh, a probe to do that to one of the asteroids, and it did that, as a matter of fact. It accomplished its task. And so this is being developed right now to be our kind of protection. So we can use the moon then as a means to be aware of various incoming objects toward the Earth and so on. And also the moon will give us a kind of industrial economy could take place on the moon. Resources are there on the moon that we can access. And in space too, asteroids, for example. They're talking about asteroid mining and things of that nature to obtain some of the resources on them. And this then indicates there's various kinds of industries that can be created eventually, wherever we go and develop a settlement. That just gives you the idea. What kind of resources on the moon? Look at some of the elements that exist presently on the moon. You have things, aluminum, platinum, palladium, silicon, magnesium, gold on the moon. Water is on the moon, and so forth. And helium, which is necessary for the fusion process. Don't know if you're familiar with the fusion process, which is the process that provides energy on all stars, including our sun, obviously. And it's the idea of combining atoms of hydrogen to produce helium, releasing tremendous amounts of energy, as we can tell with the energy coming from the sun. If we do this on Earth and be able to control it, which they're doing right now in different laboratories, and use this, that's an upcoming kind of technology that is being developed now. Right now, I think they reached the point where the same energy going into the process in their laboratories equals the amount coming out. So it's equal now. They're not producing any more energy. So at least they got to that point. Before that, they were putting more energy in than getting out. So we're getting there. But we'll get there eventually. So helium is necessary for it. Helium-3. And as a result, a lot of helium-3 on the moon that could be used for the fusion process. Maybe that's a way of getting energy as well if we develop that technology, as well as using solar energy on the moon and other settlements as well. And again, this is the idea of developing technology on the moon, and maybe technology to the point of developing. These guys were in luck; they found maybe a diner somewhere, and something of that nature might be there, or maybe Hot Dog Johnny kind of thing, or something of that nature. Here's again would be an artist's conception of a colony developing into a settlement on the moon, and again going below the surface into one of those lava tubes on the moon, developing that kind of situation for protection against radiation, incoming meteors, impact. So the idea being, what about going there? What about going to other places like planets? Well, what planets can we go to? Well, we're going to Mars. Elon Musk has the plan to go to Mars on his Starship, he calls it. Any Martians there? Well, so far we haven't come across anybody, but there might be some life in the form of maybe bacteria below the surface. There's water on Mars, you know, below the surface, and also there's pockets of ice on Mars as well. So there's flowing water below the surface, but it's briny water, very high in salinity, salt. But living things can live in salt water. And so we're still trying to find out if there's life on Mars, in that form at any rate. Here's how it looks on Mars in some areas. And this is sunset on Mars. The Martian atmosphere, made mostly of carbon dioxide, but very low density, very, very low density. So living on Mars, you'd have to have, again, the Earth environment, move from Earth to Mars. And if we're going to have that in a kind of a almost permanent way, we have to implement the process, what's known as terraforming, T-E-R-R-E, terraforming the planet like Mars so that it's like Earth, Earth, terraforming the planet. That would take, oh, hundreds of years in the future, a long process before something of that nature could take place. But some of the scientists have that in mind, and the astronomers and people in that category thinking about these settlements in space, terraforming different planets of that nature. So here's Mars anyway, as we can see. Here's an example of what might be a colony, setting up a colony on Mars, artist conception. Anyone hear of Mars One? This now is defunct. It's out of commission now, this whole program. It's a program that was set up a few years ago out of the Netherlands. And what they proposed is they wanted volunteers of people to go to Mars. It's called Mars One because they would go on a one-way trip, never come back, live on Mars, die on Mars. People volunteered. Over 100 people volunteered to go to Mars in that fashion, maybe even more. I spoke to one woman who volunteered to go, and I asked her why she wanted to go, and she said, well, adventure, first woman on Mars, history, things like that. It's like something exciting. I said, what would your family think? Well, my husband doesn't care. So I said, who'll wash his clothes and make his breakfast, being a chauvinistic, kind of fooling around. You know. And she said, oh, he can do his own. So that was the idea of Mars One, and my knowledge of it, my connection with it. So it's defunct now. But they had an interesting idea. They would send up groups of colonists like this. They would live in the habitats that they had sent up, actually. Not have to construct anything, live right in the habitat, which is what's going to have to be done by people going to the moon initially, living on board the spacecraft for a while until they're able to get things ready for themselves in terms of maybe an outpost or a colony or something of that nature. Here's again artist conception of how a settlement would look on Mars. We would have a robotic kind of devices on Mars. Elon Musk plans to go to Mars. He's sending up robotic devices first to prepare Mars for humans, setting up the 3D printers to make various things on Mars, habitats of sorts, prepared before humans come to Mars, getting water ready, food ready, and things of that nature. Robotic kind of devices, AI getting involved again in this fashion. Here again would be a settlement picture, and going below the surface again would be the best way to avoid being hit by those micrometeorites and maybe even larger. How do we go? Again, NASA would use the SLS, Space Launch System, to go to Mars. They haven't developed the program yet, but Elon Musk has. He's developed it in his SpaceX Starship, which can take 100 people. He's already tested it without people on board, and it does work. So it lands by itself, and it moves into space by itself, like he's done already with his spacecraft. Anyway, he intends to go, have robotics go there first on his, I don't know if he's going himself when he's volunteered to go, but I'm sure he has people that want to go there, and that's how they'll do it. What about the idea of the satellites, the moons going around the different kind of planets, even the gas giants like Jupiter? You can't land on Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Pluto you can maybe, because although it's not considered to be a bona fide planet anymore, it's called a dwarf planet. Still called a planet, but a dwarf. Around the gas giants, you have solid satellites, natural satellites. They're moons. And we could land on their surface maybe and develop a kind of different sort of settlements there as well. Asteroids, same idea on asteroids as well, orbiting between Mars and Jupiter, and even the free asteroids that got kicked out of the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, floating in space now. Deep space. How do we get in deep space? Wow. Are we talking about going to maybe some kind of exoplanet, going somewhere, existing in some star system, maybe Alpha Centauri, the nearest star system next to us, about what is it, about 4.2 light years away from us? A light year. A light year. You got to be traveling at the speed of light. And we can't do that yet. Don't have that technology. And even if you do, the formulation, the calculation of Einstein's formulations show that you can't exceed the speed of light, supposedly. It's the end point. You can't go past it. But maybe we can fake it out in a sense, which I'll show very shortly. But in the meantime, how do you get to deep space? How are we going to do it? Well, we can do it this way. Develop a spaceship of this nature, and then develop, boom, first of all, have this happen, space warp, hyperspace, develop a settlement of this nature, and have people like this on that settlement. Anyone see this, by the way? This is a series of Star Trek, the one called Deep Space 6, or 9 rather, I'm sorry. I'm seeing 6 upside down. Deep Space 9. Interesting. They had the spacecraft, not spacecraft, the settlement going around, not going in place there, next to a black hole where they got the energy from, because energy comes out of certain black holes as well. White holes, they call them, as a matter of fact. In any case, energy coming out of the white hole, providing them with energy instead of the sun. There's no sun or star there. They're in position there. And that's where they got their energy from. And different people come through wormholes through there and so on. Well, we're trying to get through wormholes. I just interviewed somebody, an astrophysicist, University of Buffalo, who said that there might be a wormhole in the center of our Milky Way galaxy. That's pretty close. In a black hole that's located there. You know, we have a black hole in the middle of our galaxy. Anyway, that's another story. That's another presentation. So how do we get there? Well, Elon Musk has this starship that can hold 100 people, supplies, stuff like that. But it's not going to get there very quickly. And so we can think of traveling to these distant areas of space, exoplanets, going around other star systems, by a generational trip where many generations live on board and die on the spaceship itself, in this case the starship. So you have to volunteer to go. You might be in a generation that only lives on the starship, never getting there. So it may take about 5, 6 generations before you get there, traveling through space, generation after generation. That's one way of doing it. Another way is possibly, I'll mention something else before this, possibly cryogenically. I just saw a sci-fi movie interesting called Passengers, where a group of passengers on a spacecraft in a frozen state, cryogenics, cryo means frozen, cryogenically going to a distant exoplanet to make it their homestead. Anyone see that? I don't think. Anyway, it was an interesting movie. But that's another way of doing it, putting humans into a state of suspended animation cryogenically, which has not been perfected, because you have to freeze the body, and then if you try to thaw it out, a crystallization occurs first, which destroys cells and all the structures inside the cell. And so can't quite do it yet. But that's one way of doing it, cryogenically, just putting everybody into a state of suspended animation. It would take maybe hundreds and hundreds of years, but you get there finally, and then boom, something goes off, a timer or something, and there you are. And have it run by robots in the meantime. So interesting ideas like that. Now here's one that was presented by a Mexican astrophysicist, Alcubierre, Miguel Alcubierre. And his idea is to fool the idea of the speed of light being the barrier that you can't go past. You can't go faster than the speed of light. By not having the vehicle itself go faster than the speed of light, which he said can't be done according to Einstein's calculation, but having the vehicle placed within a bubble of warping space-time fabric. And you do that by having the bubble in which is located your spacecraft, acting like a surfboard on a wave. the surfboard moves across, the wave moves the surfboard. Well, you're moving on a wave of space time inside this bubble. So the spacecraft itself is not accelerating and moving through space. It's inside of space itself, the bubble of the space time that he says can be created by using exotic matter to compress the forward motion and expand the back of it. So by those two motions, using exotic matter, which has been made on board the space station in the form of Bose-Einstein condensates I mentioned before, it's being made, but it's not perfected to any great extent yet. Use that to have it move like that surfboard on the wave through space, not violating going past the speed of light, the vehicle itself, but having the bubble of space-time itself move through space. And this is one way of doing it. And you can see a diagram on the right tries to show that idea in terms of moving like a wave through space. Alcubierre space drive, warp drive it's called sometimes. Here's an actual image. Anyone see this on the computer? Actual image taken of a black hole, not the one I mentioned in the middle of our galaxy, but some distant black hole. Anyone see this, by the way? Check this out. An actual image of a black hole has been taken. I think it got two so far, two black holes. This is not the two. This is only one. On the left is as it first came in. Then they cleared up the image, and you see it more clearly on the right. There's always some of the energy being produced around the periphery of the black hole with the material falling into it. If there's a nearby star or something nearby, its material is falling into the black hole. It eats food. And so stars are food for black holes. So these black holes then can develop wormholes. As I mentioned to you, the astrophysicist was talking about a possible wormhole in the center of our black hole in our Milky Way galaxy. Well, it might be connected through space, as you see over here. The wormhole connects one black hole with another, which could be called a white hole. Energy going and material going into one black hole and coming out somewhere in the universe or somewhere in our universe at a different location or at a different time. Time travel is wrapped up with this too. That's another whole story, another presentation. Anyway, this would mean you could see in a diagram fashion where one part of space can be accessed from another very quickly, like having a piece of paper, making two dots in the paper at each end. You have to travel through linearly from one dot to the other at a certain distance. Fold the paper. Now the distance is shorter between the dots. That's what that is with the wormhole. But as I mentioned, it has a tendency from calculation, they gather, closes very quickly. And so exotic matter, like the BECs, fifth state of matter, can be used to hold it open. Possible in the future. Technology advance. You need that. You need that. So, let's go into space. Can we do it? Well, of course, we need the technology. And this might be somebody's family located somewhere on some settlement in space. Who knows? Maybe your future generations might have access to this capability. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? So the idea being that living in space is something that is possible. And it's important because we think of ourselves as having the goal of being a space-faring civilization. And that's what is the motto, by the way, of the National Space Society and the chapter in New Jersey that I'm in. Anybody interested can see me afterwards, and I'll give you information about it, give you a card or whatever, become a member, no money, whatever. Anyway, the goal is to become space-faring civilization, and that's the whole idea to the whole story. That's it. Presentation is over. Questions?
All right. Thank you so much, Carl. So we are going to be having a question and answer session.
Oh, I'm leaving right now. My time is up.
No, there's no escape. That being said, for those of you who are here, if you have questions, you're going to be raising your hand. For those online, I know you had a number of questions. You can just type them in chat. It is very easy. you got the good end of the stick.
Type it into AI.
All right. Um, that being said, quick overview of the safety. There is a porta potty outside if you do need to use the restroom. We are using our headlights when we leave because we do not want to run people over. Uh, in
I just
addition,
hit two people, by the way. I'm sorry.
hmm?
I just hit two people on the way in. I'm sorry. How many kidding?
Well, you weren't driving, so it would be impressive if you managed to get two people,
It was my car.
considering you weren't driving. Um, is that why you do wield the canes so you can hit two at once? um, but if we are using a flashlight, please do keep that light pointed towards the ground. We do have a museum and gift shop area. Feel free to peruse that after. I will be manning the gift shop after that, just because I can't be in two places at once. So to start things off, I'm going to go with the
Wonderful.
first online question,
Okay,
which tried to run away from me.
I'll do that.
uh, Dan, one of our members or our observers here at UAC&J, wanted to know at the beginning of your talk, were you referring to the, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, Chelyabinsk incident?
Yeah, what do they call it? Chelyabinsk. It's Chelyabinsk. I guess they pronounce it that way. Chelyabinsk in Russia. That's the thing where they saw that object fly overhead, leaving a flash behind it, and a big boom, boom. It shattered windows all over the place. People got hit by shards of glass, had to be sent to the hospital, things of that nature. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That one.
Right. Was there a question out here? Perfect.
Hi, Carl. I was wanted to glad I heard you mention the multi-generational spaceships, and I wanted to know whether you've heard any thoughts of the ethics of committing multi-generations to a mission, right? Because somewhere before you have a extra planetary civilization, you have a mission, and therefore you are if you are committing multi-generations to doing a specific task, that might be walking in a little bit of an ethical gray area. Uh, has there been any talk about the ethics of multi-generational missions? That it seems like it could be ethically not 100%.
Challenged.
Yeah, challenged as almost a showstopper. Like
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
might not take off because of it.
No, you're right. As a matter of fact, now that you mention it, the idea is that there was just, you might be interested in this too. There was just what's called a Space Forum presentation on Zoom that anyone could have access to on a computer. You don't even have to have Zoom, I don't think, anyway. And we had a presenter, because I belong, as you know, to the United Space Society. We had a presenter that spoke to that topic, as a matter of fact, the ethical kind of problems involved in any kind of space travel. That being one of the areas in terms of multi-generational travel to some location in space to set up some settlement of some sort. And other considerations can be tacked onto that in terms of ethics, as you probably know, in terms of what kind of government,
Yeah.
who's going to be in charge,
Someone wants to opt out.
and do you have territory?
Yeah.
And how do you claim territory?
We want to go back.
Yeah. But it's a matter of, I think, unfortunately, I'm saying, it's a matter more, which should not be, it's a matter more of legalities than ethics, unfortunately. And as a matter of fact, how about those people I mentioned? Mars One, going to Mars, see ya, gone. They're stuck. They're not coming back. They're dying there. Good luck. Whatever's there and however you can make it, that's up to you. You know, So what about that? Ethics involved in that situation? Legalities. It must have been legal, obviously, because otherwise the program could continue.
Yeah.
Right?
You probably know more than I do about that, but wasn't that more of a
Show getter, kind of thing, like a
I don't scheme more than
like a show
Yeah,
getter.
that's
more pie in the sky than it was ever?
one. That's one thing. One of our observers wanted to bring up was now that Mars One is definitely defunct, they have
Money, money, money.
pretty much found it to be from the start a bit of a scheme, uh, with how things were set up, with numbers not matching up with reality, and like one of the volunteers who actually was like, oh, I signed not only signed up, but they were requesting extra donations from me, whereas NASA has like a formal interview process and with intense and rigorous like health and mental wellness checks. Like I got a 15-minute Skype call and they said, yeah, you're good.
That sounds like some of our politicians.
We're not gonna go there.
But certainly with the multi-generational things that you have a group of humans who are born into a situation rather than having made choice of the situation.
I
There's an ethical challenge.
Oh, there is.
that,
There's no doubt. No
that,
doubt.
that seems difficult to overcome, and so I would love to hear more people talk about.
I don't know that that necessarily falls n- overly under ethics because like your parents chose to settle down in Hope New like not your parents.
You had no choice. You had no choice, in other words.
You know,
right?
I had no choice
Yeah.
being born whether I was going to be raised in Hope, New Jersey or whether I was going to be raised in Paris, France. I pick a location on the world and that decision is not an ethical decision. That's just I'm here now. We'll make the best of it.
I think the framers of our institution might disagree with you on the level of rights that human beings have innate to themselves.
But we do have a number of more questions, so I think we're gonna.
I think it's worth the discussion, though, Kim. Your point is valid as part of the discussion, but I think a very serious discussion on the ethics needs to occur.
Oh, I agree. A serious ethics discussion is necessary. However, I do have to be the bearer of bad news and get through some of the other questions
Sorry
that
to take up so much time. Thank you, Carl.
I'll talk to you after these questions. How's that?
So you can ask more questions, but we're not gonna take one question out to the end of the earth. The next question is: if Carl had a chance to live in space or on another planet, would you?
In my time of life at the moment, I'm afraid that that would not be possible. But at an earlier point in my life history, I think I would. I think I would at an earlier point. But at this point, it's all in my imagination at this point, and in the sci-fi that I watch, pretty much, and in being a member of the National Space Society and the chapter in New Jersey. Yes, yes. Along those lines, I do have a vicarious experience with this notion of connecting to traveling in space, being on a settlement in space, and so forth.
But just imagine, you wouldn't need to watch your step if you're floating through on the space station.
No, you just eject it out into space and it burns up in the atmosphere.
Right. Was there another question out here? I hear crickets, which is funny because I actually have one behind that server rack. Right. So our next online question: do we have a replacement for the ISS in the pipeline for certain, or is that just we hope we have one?
There's some talk about that taking place. As a matter of fact, the NSS, National Space Society, has one of its goals and talking points that deals with that exactly in terms of commercializing space and having a commercial space station pick up from when the ISS becomes defunct. It closes down, which is not too far in the future. So there is some kind of talk where it can be commercialized, and there is talk that some companies are in the process of considering that. Whether they started or not, I'm not sure. For example, one of them is a company called Blue Origin. You've heard of that one.
Hmm.
That's one of them. And there's several others that I can't think of right now, but I'm sure you can spot them if you look it up on your AI cell phone. Google.
All right. So our next online question, after much chatting, someone said that bone loss and radiation would be major concerns, but does all that mean that if we have someone who lives for an extended time on a planet or the moon with greater gravity than Earth for an extended time, if they came back to Earth, would they seem to have superhuman strength?
That applies to a lot of different things that can occur on some kind of body that has different gravitational attraction than on the Earth. Because the human being, of course, is adapted to an Earth situation. And so you wouldn't only have that, which sounds interesting, but you'd have other kinds of effects produced on the human now in a completely alien environment where the physiological kind of processes that go on Earth are going on differently now in that very same human in that other location. So it brings into question ideas about growth process. If a child is born in a different condition of gravity, which is why the creation of artificial Earth gravity is very, very important, it would seem to me. Because if a child is born in a microgravity condition, how does the child develop in terms of developing into an adult? How is the child affected? How does reproduction go on generally in a different kind of condition existing elsewhere? And that whole topic has got to be addressed as well. There are a lot of questions that are involved if there's no artificial Earth gravity being produced in the settlement where we're going in the future, it would seem to me. You need that. You need that. And so what he's talking about would fit in the same category as very hard to carry our own physiology into. Now, there has been talk by many futurists, we'll call them, who have written books about the idea that rather than terraforming the place that we're going to make them like Earth, or having the conditions represent Earth by having artificial gravity in a smaller situation, not terraforming, rather than convert those areas into one compatible equal to Earth, you convert the human to fit the situation by changing how the body functions, changing the lungs, for example, how they operate, to fit operation to maybe breathe a lower pressure of oxygen, or maybe even breathe a different gas besides oxygen to produce the same effect that oxygen produces in our body. So by changing parts of the human, we can do that as well, is what some futurists have thought about. So the two different ways: change the place we're going to, or change the human going there. Strange.
Our next question was, do we have planned time zones on the moon? This person says they know that there had been some articles about making time zones on the moon, but do we know if they were formalized? Any formalized ones?
Well, there aren't many people living on the moon right now. As a matter of fact, there's none. So there's no need for time zones on the moon at this point until people begin living there, I would assume, anyway. But if you're talking about different time, there is a different time, because one rotation of the moon is 1 month. 1 day is 1 month on the moon. It's equal. So we're talking about, if we're going to create time zones,
out.
it's going to be.
We think our 8-hour workdays are bad now. Wait until
Yeah.
they're proportional on the moon.
So if we're thinking about creating time zones with settlements on the moon, it's going to be quite different than time zones here, obviously.
Yep. And again, one of our observers, Dan, had poked in because he loves Googling stuff for us when I ask nicely. That there is a proposal to create, I'm guessing, a singular time zone for the moon, so that
Sure.
the different nations' moon bases can all be on the same time. Otherwise, like, your base would operate on the same time as the country of origin, and that means if there's a problem, if in the the European base is like, oh no, need help, everyone on the Chinese base is kind of asleep and going, oh, well, rolling out of bed. So it looks like they're proposing that there will be one coordinated time zone.
Well, the same thing is true of Mars. As a matter of fact, we have all kinds of different probes on Mars right now that will give you information about Mars. If you Google it, you can pick up information about the temperature on Mars. What is it now, this very moment? Well, not this very moment, because there's a time gap between us and other planets and the moon to a certain extent. It takes light to be reflected from the moon about 1.3 seconds. So we're not getting light from the moon real time. We're not getting light real time from Mars either, or from the sun for that matter. Sun somehow goes out now, or blows up, which it's not supposed to do based on its evolution, the way it's thought to evolve. It would take 8 minutes before we knew it. It takes that amount of time for that light to get to us. So the same is true of communication, because radio waves travel at the same speed as light.
All right. Any questions? All right. So our next one is, how often do meteorites hit the side that we would originally be inhabiting, that they are that big of a considered threat?
Depends location in space where the settlement is going to be. If it's at the asteroid belt.
No, they're talking about on the moon.
I kind of wonder about it. Oh, they're on the moon yet. Okay.
Yeah.
So on the moon, there's still some stuff flying by that gets burnt up in our atmosphere. Many of them do before they hit the ground, fortunately. So we have the atmosphere as a means of protection, a shield for us. But on the moon, believe it or not, there is a slight atmosphere on the moon, traces of gases making up the lunar atmosphere, but not enough to really cause any kind of shield for the moon in terms of protecting it against any kind of small particles bombarding the moon. So pretty much whatever comes into the moon hits it and creates craters all over the moon, big, small, in between, and whatever else.
All right. And another great fact check that I asked for is, the moon is hit by a 1 kiloton impact roughly once every 4 years, and there's lots of smaller impacts that could also be dangerous between each one of them.
Oh,
but the moon's a fairly large place, so
that's good. Thank you.
because I don't know this, and I can only have so many tabs open, so I ask for help for Googling.
Good.
All right, so our next one is, if you left an ice cream sandwich out, like, on a plate on the surface of the moon, unprotected, would it freeze dry into astronaut ice cream?
Well, I think astronaut ice cream is different than an ordinary ice cream cone, made of different kinds of ingredients to a certain extent, I would imagine. Maybe with more nutrients in it than you find in a typical ice cream in an ice cream cone or sandwich or something of that nature.
I thought astronaut ice cream is they just took the ice cream sandwich, stuck it in a freeze dryer, and called it a day. I'm fairly certain that's how they do it.
Nutrients in space, so this would be one way of getting nutrients, by placing it in the food that the astronauts eat. But in any case, so would it freeze? It would freeze. If it melted, it would freeze on the moon, certainly, except if it were on the side well, all sides of the moon get lit up, eventually.
Yeah.
There isn't a dark side and a light side. There's a far side and a near side. But all parts of the moon get lit up eventually by the sun as it revolves in orbit around us. All parts get facing the sun occasionally at one point or another. So wherever the ice cream is located, when that part gets sunlight as the moon revolves around, the moon revolves around the Earth. Whenever that part gets sunlight, it would melt. So it depends where it is. If it's in a crater, protected, shielded against sunlight, then maybe it would refreeze again into what it was originally.
All right. So we are getting down to the last of the questions that I see. So online chat, if you have any last minute questions, do get those in.
Just a quick comment.
Okay.
I like that that ice cream question, and I just thought that we could call it the ice cream dilemma, and it'd be funny if NASA ends up scrubbing any future plans for moon bases because they can't figure out the ice cream dilemma.
Which is funny you said that because we already had someone in online chat saying, "Oh man, if there's not ice cream, I ain't going." So,
yeah,
for
but
some-
with a 3D printer, you can make pizza.
as long as you have the pizza flavored filament. All right. So, our next question is, what's your favorite Star Trek show?
Oh, that's a hard one. Oh, that's like apples and oranges. I like apples and I like oranges. So how can I make a differentiation between the different shows? I like them all almost equally. I don't know. As you notice, they did evolve though, from the original Star Trek with Shatner as the captain.
Yeah, they all have their pros and cons.
Yeah, and they evolved into a more sophisticated kind of Star Trek with more technology and things of that nature. But I noticed too, as an aside, that many of the different sort of processes on board the spacecraft has been developed and now are being used actually. I came across information where, although it's not being used presently, this is an example of a device that was used by the doctor, right? A tricorder to examine a patient ahead of time, right? It's being developed by some medical doctor somewhere. I forgot where exactly, but it's in the process of being developed right now. And what about
Good, I know.
what about the cell
I know
phone?
what to save up for.
What about the cell phone? And I think I believe the Chinese claim that some of the scientists have worked on teleportation. Beam me up, Scotty. But teleportation at a micro level, obviously, we're talking about subatomic particles and things at a quantum level.
Yeah, I
actually.
believe there was within the past year, maybe two, they had that article came out where they finally managed to teleport a light particle from one place to another.
Yeah, quantum energy. Yeah, and maybe even subatomic particles now to a certain extent. I'm not
That
certain
amount
about
of science is above my pay grade, which is
that.
since it's a volunteer organization free.
Hey, I'm just a teacher.
Let's see. Oh, here's the answer you should get, and I'm stealing this from one of our chatters.
That's a bad lead-in. You know that, right?
Their favorite Star Trek show is the one they're watching at the time, of course.
I like that. I got to keep that in mind for future questions. That's good.
I figured I'd give you that one because
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
good, that's
hey.
good.
All right. So it looks like that's the end of our online questions. I do want to thank whoever Anonymous was. They did gift 5 subscriptions at the beginning of stream. So thank you for your support, online anonymous person. with that, any last minute questions out here? So, like I said before, do check us out, uacnj.org. Do join us online. Hit those like, follow, and subscribe buttons that are free. If you feel awfully kind, you can use the paid version too. We also like that and are never going to discourage that.
And may I say a parting phrase before you sign off?
Yep,
When you're finished?
I'm just gonna finish
Yeah, sure.
first. We also have our social media pages, our Facebook, our Instagram, our Discord servers. All great place to ask questions, share your love of science and astronomy. And with that, Carl, you can have the last phrase this time.
The motto of the National Space Society is Ad Astra, to the stars in Latin.
All
My
right.
parting, thank you for joining us.
Live long and prosper. Have a good night.